I'm very honored to be here in your beautiful country and to follow these four amazing and brilliant educators with such incredible ideas. And to be honest, what I'm going to share with you is built on all of what they've just shared with you. I'm so glad that they explained the history of education and so many of the ideas that are embedded in Summit Public Schools. And so what I want to do is just take us back for a moment to think about why we have schools. So everybody has a story. Every single one of us has a story. Just think for a moment about your own personal story, who you are and where you came from, who your parents are, and the language you speak, and what makes you laugh, what makes you cry, what you care about, and what doesn't matter to you. Every single one of us has a story. And every child that comes to one of our schools is this beautiful human being with that story. And those beautiful children are just seeking to express themselves in their own unique ways. And outside of school, our world understands this. We give them different clothes to wear, and we give them ways that they can personalize their phones with different colors and covers, and we give them choices in music and television and movies. And each of these individual children, mostly what they're looking for is just someone who wants to know them, who cares about who they are and what they think. And they all have their own individual goals and ideas of who they might be and what they might become. And yet, as we've learned this morning, in our schools in America and across the world, we design our schools to make sure that all of these students are the same, that we treat them exactly the same, and we don't take the time to learn who they are or to think about them as individuals. We have a factory model. We put them on the assembly line, and we just ask them to go down that assembly line. And we put pieces and parts on them. We hope that they stick, but we also know that for many of them, they won't stick. And by the time they get to the end of the line, or even before, those children will be defective. And by definition, in a factory, they'll just fall away. That's where the term dropout comes from. That's literally a factory term. So we've created a system that at one point in time was exactly what we needed, but today it's completely out of date. And unfortunately, the dialogue in America, and I suspect here too, is oftentimes about how our system is broken. It's not broken. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do. And so then when we don't talk about that, then we talk about the teachers. We say the teachers aren't working hard enough. They're not good enough. We don't have enough of them. But that's not true either, because I've never met a teacher who wakes up in the morning and says, how can I ruin children today? How can I harm them? How can I serve them poorly? The only teachers I've ever met wake up every single morning and think, how can I do the best for my children, even though all the odds are against me? How can I do this in the context of a big system that really doesn't want me to know my children or support them, that gives me huge classes and fast passing periods and big, thick textbooks and all sorts of rules and tells me I'm not doing a good job? And so at Summit, we wondered, why in the world does anyone think that this type of school is going to work? Why are we surprised when students drop out or don't go or are disengaged? or don't do well. And so we started thinking about, what if we could create schools that focused on each and every single individual student, that took into account their goals and their dreams and what they're interested in and their passions? And what if we could create a school that every moment of every day, every student was engaged in something that was exactly what they needed right at that moment? Not way above where they are, not way below, but exactly what they need in that moment. And what if we could do this in public schools with the same amount of money that we're using today to create big, impersonal schools where many of our students are dropping out and most of them aren't learning what they're supposed to learn? What if we could do that in public schools with the same student populations that live in our cities and in our current schools with the same amount of money? Wouldn't this be the best thing? Wouldn't this be in the best interest of each of these individuals and their families and our communities and our cities, our states, and our country? And so in order to think about this and do this, we started where most companies who create clothes and technology and music for students, where they start. We started with a process called user-based design, where you actually go to the user, to the student, and you ask them, what would work for you? And you ask questions, and you ask questions, and then you design based on what they share with you and what they tell you that they need. And so we did this with students, and we had some help with some people you might know, a company called Google, who really thinks about this. And we did this with our whole organization, and we asked these questions, and we asked our students. And what we came up with is that in order to create schools that serve our kids, we have to completely redesign them. We can't just tinker around the edges. We literally have to rethink the whole entire system, the whole process. And at the heart of that, we have to put the student. The student has to own their own learning. The student has to direct their own learning. And the student has to think about and decide what they're going to learn and do next. And why is this important? There's a lot of conversation and discussion about how in the future these students are going to have on average 5 careers in their life. And of those 5, 3 of them aren't even invented yet. We don't even know what those careers are going to be. And yet these students come to me when they're 14 and they leave me when they're 18. And I'm supposed to give them everything they need in order to live an entire lifetime filled with careers that don't even exist yet. There's no content that I can stuff in their brain that's going to prepare them for that. So how do I get them ready for that? And what we believe and what we discovered is we have to create students who can drive and own their own learning, what we call self-directed learners. Learners who can learn for the rest of their life, who have the tools to learn for the rest of their life beyond when they leave me. It can't be about me pouring knowledge into their brain, packaging them up, sending them out, hoping that they're going to be set. I just have to give them, I have to empower them. And so, that's my favorite. I love that one. When you create self-directed learners, you create learners who have purpose. They know what they're doing and why they're doing it. And this is a really key ingredient. Think about you in your own life and your own career. When you have purpose for something, doesn't it happen much easier, much better, much faster? And they have autonomy. They have control over what they're doing. This is really critical for kids. They need to control, for not just kids, for us too. I don't like when anyone tells me what to do. I want to have control over what I'm doing. And so being a self-directed learner means you have purpose and you have autonomy. And so we've created a very simple, very intuitive, self-directed learner cycle. And teaches kids how to become self-directed learners. You start by setting goals, and then you develop a plan for how to achieve them. And then you learn what you need to learn in order to achieve those goals in that plan. And then you show what you know, and you reflect on that. You think about what went well and what didn't, what needs to happen next, and then you set new goals. It's a very simple idea. But what we know from research is this is not how students behave, because our schools don't ask them to behave in this way. Our schools are better at getting kids ready for jail than they are for career. We teach them how to show up on time, eat when we tell them to, do what we tell them to, follow the rules, stay quiet, sit in a row, raise your hand. We don't ask them to set their own goals and make their own plans and learn and figure out how to do that. And so this is the self-directed learner cycle. And what's key at Summit is that it's connected to and driven by every student's individual goals, what we call the trajectory. And so when students enter our schools, they create what we call a personalized learning plan. And the plan starts with where they want to go in the future. And for us, our students are in high school, and so they come in at age 14, and so we ask them to think 4 years, and 5 years, and 10 years, and 20 years, and that's really hard, but they get better at it over time. And so we say, what college do you want to go to? And we ask every student to imagine themselves in college. And so, for example, this student said, I want to go to UC Berkeley. This is a famous university in California. And we say, okay, you know what? Technology allows us to know what you need to be able to do and know in order to go to Berkeley. We know that. This is not a mystery. And technology and teachers also can tell us what you know as a student. We can actually assess that. We can tell you in the first couple of weeks what you know and the skills you have, and we can tell you if your goal, your trajectory towards your goal, is in line with where you are currently. And this student, you can see, is off track. She's not going to make it to Berkeley if she just stays on the track she's on, if she just keeps going at the same rate and pace. Unfortunately, factory model schools don't do anything about changing that student's track. They just let her stay on the same track. And what's worse, they don't tell her that that track's not going to get her to Berkeley. We just pretend, and then when she doesn't get there, we act surprised. But we actually know. We know, but the students don't know. And so in our model, in a self-directed learning model, we give the students all of this information. We put it into their hands. We use tools like this to show them exactly what they're going to need to be able to know and do, and how they're going to have to change tracks in order to get where they want to go. And we focus in on 4 areas. And you've heard about all these this morning, and we use different words, but we're talking about the same things. And so the first is, we've heard a lot about content. There is content knowledge that we need to know. We need to know how to solve certain math problems, and we need to know key vocabulary, and we need to how to know and do things. That's really important, because you can't solve big problems if you don't know and you can't do certain things. And so that's one, content knowledge. But perhaps even more important are what we call cognitive skills. These are the big skills like solving problems and making a hypothesis and asking really good, deep questions and being able to effectively write and communicate ideas and analyze things. Big cognitive skills that are cut across all different content areas and that you need to work on for many years in order to get better. That's our second really key area. The third area are what we call non-cognitive skills, or social-emotional learning, or academic literacy, or a whole bunch of other terms we use to describe what it means to be an effective person in our society. So you need to be able to work with other people. You need to be able to manage your emotions and have relationships. You need to be able to set goals. You need to be able to make plans. you need to do all sorts of these non-cognitive skills in order to be a successful person in society. And so that's our third. And then finally, very much like High Tech High and all the models you've heard, we believe that students need to have as many authentic, real-world experiences as possible so that they know and are familiar with what will be demanded of them in life. That school and life should have a very porous boundary. That you should be able to flow between the two, and it should feel very much alike and similar, and that is what's critical. And so those are the 4 areas that help make up if the student's going to be on track to meet their goal. And so what does that look like in a daily basis? What does a school look like that reimagines itself in order to support every individual student to make it there? And so the big ideas here are that the biggest part of the day on the left side is what we call core. And so rather than going from classroom and subject to subject, students are engaged in big problems, big projects that are interdisciplinary, that involve science and English skills, and really focus on those cognitive skills. And they're engaged in the problems and solving the projects, and they're producing, very much like what you just heard, real outcomes. So real live things that make sense, that would be very much like what they see in the real world. And that's the bulk of their day. And then rather than sending them home to do homework where they practice problems and maybe a teacher assigns the whole class the same set of 20 problems and maybe you know it already and you don't need to do them and you don't know it and 20 doesn't get you there and you only need to do 5, we have what we call personalized learning time. And in that time, the students are really focused on exactly what they need. And so you saw some of those learning maps earlier, and technology lets us zero in on exactly what each individual needs and then deliver that to them. And then finally, a big block of every day is what we call community time. And this is where students engage in their passions and their interests, and they practice a lot of those skills we're talking about. And school becomes very personal to them. It's where we let them express themselves and where they're doing individual things with other kids who like those same passions and interests. And where they have a mentor, an adult, who is a strong bonded relationship with them, who stays with them their whole time they're in school and helps them to think about setting their goals and their plans and working on all they're seeking to achieve. And that happens for most of the school year. But 2 full months of the school year, so 20% of an entire year, is spent in what we call an expedition. And so these are 2 to 4 week periods of time where the students go out into the world. And they do really in-depth internships, just like you heard about at High Tech High. Or they go and they they engage at a community school for music and art. And they write a drama, and they perform it, and they put all the sets together, and every single experience culminates in a publicly presentable performance, one that's very authentic. So if they're doing journalism, they create a newspaper, a publication that would go to the world. Or if they're doing photography, they have a whole exhibition. Really real-world authentic experiences. We have students working at NASA helping to design the sales pitch for a new satellite, or kids working at Tesla Motors on the designs for next generation cars, things like that. They're engaged in the community and the real world. And for the teachers in the room, while our students are doing this, our teachers have 40, that's 40, days of professional development to craft, to learn their craft, to develop, to work together. Technology powers all of this. And we've got incredible technology today that I won't spend time on today, but I can share this afternoon, that shows us exactly, that allows us to do things we could never do before and allows teachers to focus all their time on really high-value work. And so what I will end with is just quickly, as I was sitting in the audience, this happens to me every time, I was thinking to myself, wow, these people in front of me are so amazing, and they've done incredible work. I could never do that. Then I thought, oh, I'm here because you think I'm doing that. But the truth is, my story is that I was just a really poor kid who grew up in America with a mom and my father in prison. And I didn't think that I was going to have a chance. And I had a couple people who believed in me. And it was because of education that I made it to where I am. So as I became a teacher, and then a school leader, then a school designer, and now I'm here, and I work on policy now, and I work on replicating. Every single step of the way, I think about my own story. And I think, just do what you can do. Don't leave today with all these big ideas and think that you can't do anything because it's too big. Do what you can do in your classroom, or your school, or your city, or your district. And bit by bit and piece by piece, it will come together with what everyone else is doing, and we can make a very, very big difference. Thank you.